Pop quiz, hotshot. Who is the biggest Star Wars villain? Not him. Not him. Not him. What if I told you that it's actually him? Like all movies, people's reaction to Star Wars actually comes from the movie itself, what it does in the real world, and what it does for their own life. And when you take that into account, the most negative feelings are actually directed at George Lucas. For some reasons that you might guess, but another that relates to why people flame each other online that I've never heard anyone say. So, let's talk about it. Now, of course, George Lucas created Star Wars, so you'd think people would like him for that. But it seems to be the opposite. So what's the deal? Well, first, we know that in a lot of ways, quality depends on what we expect. If people get an average movie when they expect a great one, they'll be more upset. But on top of that, people accuse Lucas of ruining their childhood. This is because the original Star Wars movies came to a lot of people at a formative time in their lives.
It was better than The Empire Strikes Back and Star Wars, at least I think so.
And so they like to think of those movies as being unique and special. And by bringing back the same characters and filmmakers and creating a disappointing movie, it threatens that belief. And something not nearly as good enters that same spot in our brains. So, while the stories of the original movies stay the same, the outside stories about what it means in the real world and to us change dramatically. And since our emotions smush all three of those together, it has the same result as if it changed the movies themselves. But beyond that, a lot of the anger for this is directed at George Lucas himself, to the point that people have drawn cartoons, written songs, and made short films just to troll him. And I think there's a reason for that, which shows us something else. Because Lucas is seen as the key person responsible for making the prequels, which, as we said, go against something we want to be true. And the feelings that are released by that, as you might have guessed, are the exact same feelings that are released by movie villains. The key thing that movie villains do is threaten to make the world different from what we want.
It's not true. That's impossible!
And so, since we have the same emotion toward him in our head, we respond to him in the same way we would to a villain, which means we speak badly about him and want him to be punished. But there's more to this, and this is where I think it gets interesting, because it's not just where the reaction comes from, but also why it's so strong, which relates to why people are so mean in general on the internet. There have been a lot of explanations for it, like how we don't see screen names as real people, which doesn't explain why we're just as mean to people we see on video, and also how being anonymous makes us more willing to show our true feelings, which probably is true, but I also think there's something else. This goes back to punishment and how it works to stop bad behavior. Like we've said, bad behaviors have good results for the person who does them, like getting free things. And punishment has to be measured so that it's bad enough to overcome those good results. Now, we talked about how this works with the law, but it applies just as much to our own feelings and actions. Because we do certain things naturally to punish people who harm us, and that has to be measured too. And that leads to something very specific. Because most of the punishment we use against each other is damage to our reputations, saying that other people are not smart or not strong, or other things which hurt our chances of mating and thus make us feel bad. This is what insults actually do. But, and here's the thing, an insult has to be heard to do damage. And not everyone has the same ability to be heard. Some people have more people who listen to them, some people spend more time in the group, and so on. So, if your insult is unlikely to be heard, what do? You could physically attack the person, but that's usually too much. So, are you out of options? No, because it turns out that if we're 1/10 as likely to be heard, we can defend ourselves with insults just as effectively if we make them 10 times worse. This goes back to how we measure punishments in general. Since, like we've talked about, you have to raise the punishment for crimes that are hard to catch, so it overcomes all the times someone can get away with it. Here, we instinctively use more damaging insults when it's less likely that they'll be heard. Like, for example, when someone is far away or on a screen or won't read our comments. And you can actually see how this can change when that situation changes. When we find out that we are being heard more than we thought, we tend to immediately lower the intensity of what we're saying and undo any extra damage. But overall, I think this is exactly what happened to George Lucas. Yes, he disappointed people with the Star Wars prequels and made the original films slightly less enjoyable, but the intensity of what people have said comes from the feeling that he won't hear or read it. And of course, this has caused thousands of other cases where fans attack actors and directors, and online flaming in general. So I figured I'd point it out. If you found this interesting, click the bell. If you didn't, flame me in the comments section. And either way, thanks for watching.